Hey, I'm Sammy Robbins.
Spencer Robbins.
And we're the owners of Alive and Free Consulting, and you would not believe how many messages on Instagram, Facebook groups, and all of the other things, emails. We get asked so much. How do I know if God is choosing my husband?
Probably hundreds of times.
Yeah, no, like so much. How do I know who my husband is? How do I know when God's going to tell me? How do I know if God's going to choose my husband?
Oh, and wouldn't it be so much easier if God was just like, it's this person, and it told the other person, hey, it's this person. You're like, cool, well now we don't have to choose. It's just like, now we know, we might as well just make it happen.
I don't have to worry about failure, disappointing God, right or wrong, good or bad. I don't have to worry about any of those. I can negate all of it if God just tells me. Now, I don't want to make a mockery of God doing that, because I have heard of a handful of incredible stories where that actually has been the case. So what I'm not saying is that God doesn't operate like this. What I am saying is that our beliefs are very different from that, and we want to dive into what those are, what we believe about this, and maybe you can adopt some of our beliefs, because it brought me a ton of healing and freedom whenever I got revelation on these different things.
First off, we're probably going to disagree on some different things.
Yes.
So don't get angry at us for disagreeing with you, but try and keep an open mind and understand where we're coming from when we're sharing some things, because I have a pretty controversial approach to this in Christendom.
Oh, it pissed me off when we were friends.
Yeah, but ultimately it leads to a lot of freedom, and we'll talk about all this stuff. So how would you respond to that question, Sammy?
You know, if you would have asked me 2.5 years ago, I would have totally said, I totally believe that there is the one. I 100% believe that God pulled me from my husband's side. Just in the very beginning, just like God created Adam and Eve, and he pulled Eve from his side chamber, his rib, and he created her from him, God did the same with me. He's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. And so I know and believe that there's a one for me. And after 2 years of crazy pain and disappointment and thinking that someone was the one for me, getting all this prophetic guru mumbo jumbo, you know, from God himself, but also from people around me, I thought for sure that this guy was supposed to be my husband. And it turns out that he wasn't. And through that really painful situation, and embarrassing, very embarrassing, through that situation, I got so much revelation, because God revealed to me through that painful season that marriage is about two people choosing each other. So if God told me that this guy is my husband, and with his free will he chooses not to marry me, then he's not my husband, right? Because his free will wasn't in alignment with what God spoke. Now, I totally believe that God's words don't return void. If you use that over a promise that God gave you about another person, it will probably end up in pain, because I believe that God gave us free will in the very beginning, right? Everyone says this saying that God is in control, and I think the church uses that to help us justify and explain our pain away. But in the beginning, when God gave us free will, that was him saying, I no longer have control.
And he also gave the earth to Adam and Eve to subdue it and have dominion over it. So wait, if Adam and Eve have dominion over it, does that mean that God gave that to them? I think so.
And so that also explains why there are so much bad, awful things happening in the world, right? There's sin, there's death, there's destruction, there's stealing. Well, if God was in control, then that would make him responsible and at fault for every single thing that happens, right? I think that's why so many of us are torn over the idea of God, because they're like, well, if he's so good, why did this happen? Why did this happen? Why are people starving? Why is there war? He's not in control of everything. That's the only way to explain it. Otherwise, it'd be only good things that were happening, right? And so if God gave us free will, then that means that, to me, this means that if me, with my free will, chooses a man, and he, with his free will, chooses me, then that's the one. But I don't believe that God just handpicks someone for you. What I personally believe, and this may sound a little complex, is because God is so good and knows us so well and is so sovereign that, for example, with us, he knew the man that I was going to choose in the end. And because he's sovereign and knows that, he goes ahead and says, this is the man that you're going to choose with your free will, and I'm going to bless that. So I totally believe that I was made for this man, but I totally believe that I could be made for another man too if I so chose it. Right? I think God actually blesses our free will. I think he loves our free will. And I think it leads to a lot of pain when we put a man in a box of, the husband that we're supposed to have and say that God said that he's the one. It makes it super high stakes. And whenever that thing doesn't end up happening, we start questioning God. We start questioning if we're hearing God right. And I think God's heart may be on something, but what I've found the most is that he actually loves to bless our heart's desires. And sometimes we get those two things confused. Sometimes God speaks something to us and we misinterpreted it. We put it our meaning of what we want it to mean. And we're like, oh, well, God said this, so it must mean this. But God doesn't give us the meaning of everything that he says. So how would we know until we actually see it play out? So that's my explanation. I probably have some more thoughts, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
So I have a friend named Ahab, and the one time I've ever heard something that felt healthy to me was he said that he went to this wedding, a friend's wedding, and when he was at the wedding, he saw this girl from across, and God told him, that's your wife. But he didn't share that with her until the day of their wedding day after they had said, I do. And because he didn't want to use that information to control her, and he wanted her to have a complete free decision on her side, and I believe that's the way that God would deliver that information anyways.
Yeah.
Anytime I hear saying, like, God said it's this person, I hear a desperation in their tone and their voice. And it's like, but God said, it's like there's this weight where I'm like, if that's true, the way that God would have delivered that information is it actually would have led you into deeper intimacy with God. And if that thing would have fallen apart, you would have actually still had a deep level of intimacy with God afterwards. And so I'm wondering, when people say that, how are they delivering that information? How are they receiving that information? More often than not, I'd say 99.9% of the time, I believe that people don't hear God around their marriage. Here's what I hear.
I think it leads us to do crazy stuff if we do know that God said that he's the one. Well,
okay, let's talk about a few different people that might hear this and might be like, well, God said it was this person. You have a person that maybe doesn't go out in the streets getting words of knowledge for people, doesn't hear God super accurately for anything else, but somehow in their dating life, they hear God really clearly that it's this person that they're going to marry. I'm like, when I see that thing crumble and fall to the ground, I'm like, it makes sense to me, because my question is, if you hear God so clearly, why aren't you going to the ER and getting words of knowledge for people? Why aren't you hearing God for people that desperately need to hear God? Why aren't you delivering the information of what you're hearing from God to other people? If you are so confident that he said something verbatim, why is it the one thing that you feel like you have desperate need over that you hear his voice over? To me, that communicates a lack of trust that God's actually to take care of you. Faith without hope is really weird. Faith is a confident expectation in one thing. You put all of your eggs in that basket and believe for it that it's going to happen. Let's say it's a person that's on their deathbed. You hear word from the Lord that God's going to heal that person. You pray for them. You're like everything in you, and that person gets healed. You're like, that's incredible. That's faith. Faith put all of your eggs in the basket of that one outcome. But hope is a foundation of faith. In Hebrews 11:1 it says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hope is the confident expectation that good is coming. Hope means that I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know that it's going to be good. And so Romans 15:13 says, now may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, that you may abound with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. So my thing is that when I hear a lot of people say that this is my spouse, or God told me, or or is God going to give me a word about this, or how do I know if this is the one? I don't see that anywhere in Scripture. And if people are saying or asking for that, I think that what they're actually asking for is security or freedom or whatever that person represents to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's anything here's how I see it. I'm like, you have James chapter 4. It talks about why are there wars that wage among you? Why are there arguments? Why is there, and he goes into all these different things. He says, because you covet but cannot obtain. And it talks about how we have these big desires for things, but we can't have them. And we envy for things, but we can't get them. And it says, and you have not because you ask not. So first problem is that we don't actually ask God for them. But then people go, well, I've asked God for a wife or a husband for a really long time. Why don't I have it? I listen to the scripture. And then he says, you have not, or you ask and do not obtain because you ask wrongly. And so it's kind of like if you go up to a good dad, a 5-year-old goes up to a good dad, and he's like, Dad, I want a birthday present. And I want this one birthday present. No matter what you give me, I'm going to be really disappointed unless you get me this one thing that I really, really desperately need, which is a box of live hand grenades. like a good dad's going to be like, no, I'm not going to give you that. And they're like, I'm so disappointed. Like, I thought, like, this is what I needed, this is what I wanted. But that dad's like, this will kill you. And I think that a lot of people are asking God for idols. And I think that a lot of people, a marriage or a spouse is actually an idol that's going to pull people away from intimacy with God. The people that I feel like a word from the Lord about who a spouse may be are the people that we never hear about it with. We never hear the story unless it was something that was like, I knew, but God presented it in such a way that I knew that she had a choice or he had a choice, and I just had to trust even if it didn't work out, he was still going to take care of me.
There's something too, like, because I have heard stories of people that are having tons of marital problems or they're divorced. And they're like, I'm so confused because I felt like God told me that he was the one, so why did all of this happen? Why did he cheat on me? Why did I, never get my desires met or my needs met, or why was I never fulfilled? And then God's responsible for what he told them to choose into, right? But that, again, takes away their free will.
And I don't believe God ever said that with those situations.
I think it leaves him responsible, and I think that we confuse the desire of our heart for what God speaks all of the time. What I see the nature of God to be is him getting really excited about the things that we long for, and him being like, Spencer, if you really want Sammy, I think that could be a really good thing. Oh, but do you feel more excited about this person? Do you see more qualities in that woman that you love? I think that could be a really good thing. Maybe you should try pursuing her. Maybe she's the one for you. And I think like a best friend or like a really good parent or a really good leader, he supports us, he loves us, he gives us ideas, he's intimate with us in the process. But I don't think that he's like, oop, she's the one, he's the one, it's all done, this is my will, I finished. I think that ends in a lot of pain. But I think if he has two people that are both willing to lean in and to choose love and to choose each other, I think he so blesses that.
It's like an arranged marriage. It's like just go to a Muslim nation that practices that and let your parents choose who you want to marry. And when things get really difficult and painful, try not blaming your parents for that.
Doesn't that sound awful?
Just try.
And yet that's what we do with God all of the time. We actually put God in that spot of our parents that would arrange a marriage for us. And just like you'd be pissed at your parents, same thing happens with God.
You know what we hate as human beings? Being used. Like, think of a relationship where somebody used you. We ask God to use us all the time. God doesn't actually have the desire to use us. He has never in Scripture one time said he used somebody. He's actually always had relationship with and co-labored with people. You look at the life of Moses. Moses was actually able to affect God's decisions because he had such an intimacy with him. Like, think about that. A God that is so meek, he's willing to be affected by you. Like, that's the God that I know demonstrated his love on the cross. Jesus had to become a man to demonstrate the will of God because the world was left to man. He actually was like, here, I'm giving control of the earth to you. That's why the first Adam was a man, had control of the earth, and then we saw what happened there. Not good things, Old Testament. Look at all the death and destruction and crazy things that happened there. Then Jesus came to completely reconcile that world back to God. but he had to do it through man, right? And so we are looking for other people to take responsibility for our lives. But at the end of the day, our highest level of freedom comes when we take responsibility for our lives.
So much of what I see with, like, we have over 350 clients now, and we have so many women that when they're dating, it is so high stakes. You wouldn't believe the pain that comes up, the triggers that happen, and it's across the board. It's not just with our clients. It felt high stakes to me. I'm sure it felt high stakes to you at different points in time. And the question typically is, well, how do I know if I should keep choosing into this? How do I know if he's the man for me? How do I know if it's good? How to this? And you know what I hear just after the almost decade of inner healing and emotional health that I've been diving into is, I'm so afraid of failing. I'm so afraid of being a failure, getting it wrong, making a mistake. I'm so afraid of what that means about me if I make a wrong decision.
Do I deserve punishment if I get it wrong? That's where fear comes from.
Most of the time, it all comes down to a should and a shouldn't. Good, bad, right, wrong, which all leads to shame, guilt, and condemnation. So we're just trying to avoid this feeling of I'm not enough. If I choose wrong, it all comes back down to me, and I'm not enough. Now, on the other side of the pendulum, yes, you want good things. Yes, you don't want to choose wrong. Yes, you want to have a really healthy marriage with a really amazing man. But when it comes down to it, I think that it's really, really simple. When you're with that person, do they feel like your best friend? Is this a person where you're like, I don't get sick of you? You know, my favorite thing about being married to him is that I don't get sick of him, and I get sick of everyone because I'm an introvert. I get agitated and annoyed and drained, and I'm a very loving person, but because I'm introverted, my tolerance is really, really short. But one of the reasons why I knew I wanted to marry him is because I was so excited about everyday life with him, because there was peace, there was love, there was connection. Anytime there's confrontation, anytime we argued, anytime we feel disconnected, we're both, even if we're not actively doing a good job, we're both leaning into connection the best way that we know how, and we're both willing to always try and change and grow and heal and do whatever it takes to find freedom, whether it's our own issue or one between us. So look at the really simple things. What's their character like? Do they love God? Like, what are your non-negotiables? For me, they had to love Jesus. Not because I don't love people who don't love Jesus. I don't care. But if I'm going to choose a spouse, it's really important for me to feel united in our belief systems. The next thing is character. Another was, do I enjoy him? Do I want to be around him? Do I enjoy in and out doing all day long life with him? Easy. It really is for me. It really was that simple. And when I knew all of those things were there, I knew that I was all the way in. And I want to share just two more things. First, again, is we believe that God totally does speak to people. This is your husband and this is your wife. And I believe that it works out. We have a friend, Nick and Amanda, and they were on the phone with each other. Was it the first time they were on the phone with each other? They both knew, this is my husband and this is my wife, and they told each other. And then they freaked out, and then they end up getting married. And so it's worked out beautifully for them. And I think with certain people, God actually trusts, like, hey, I trust that you're not going to screw this up, so I'm going to let you in on this little bit of information. This is actually the person that you're going to choose. This is actually the person that I'm going to bless you with.
Like, if this is going to draw my kids closer to me long term.
Yes.
Then I believe that God could totally move like that.
I have another, she's one of my best friends. I was actually mentoring her at the time. She moves in with me, and the month before, God spoke to her and said, your husband's name is Matthew. A month later, she walks into this party. There's this guy that she thinks is really cute. They hit it off. His name is Matthew. They crashed and burned really quickly because there was way too much intimacy, not sexually, but just they overshared way too much and were so invested so quickly, and it scared him. He ran away because he was so afraid, but a year later, he pursued her, and now they're married and have a baby. So I think it really is. I think God speaks things in different timing if we know how to handle it. And the last thing that I'll say is I totally believe that God told me that he wasn't my husband. A year before we started dating, this crazy situation happened. I rejected him. He started pursuing one of my friends because he was like, well, if you don't like me, I'm not going to just wait around for you. I'm going to keep my interests somewhere else. And I feel like God said to me, Sammy, I removed him from your life because this isn't who I have for you. I removed him as an option. And it was hard because I was starting to kind of have feelings for him, and I was wondering, God, is he the one or is he not the one? Just to tell me so I know what to do. And I think that because I wasn't ready, God told me no in that season, just to give me peace in my process until I was actually ready, because I know that I would have ran really fast and really hard had I tried to start dating him then. And a year and a half later, or however long it was, God told me one weekend, he said, Sammy, this weekend I'm going to satisfy your heart's desire, and I'm going to reveal your heart to you. And so I ended up going to a wedding with him, and we'll share the whole story maybe even after this. But I ended up going to a wedding with him, fell in love with him. I realized for the first time, man, I really do like you, and I really want to be with you. And I come home from that weekend, and we're starting to kind of date, and it hit me. God said, I'm going to reveal your heart to you, and I'm going to satisfy your desires. And I felt so full just getting to dive into relationship with him. But what happened was my heart was revealed to me. What was revealed to me was that I actually liked him, that I actually wanted to be with him, that I actually wanted to pursue it with him. And from there, I didn't spiritualize anything. I tried to for a little while. It felt so confusing. And I was like, you know what? I actually believe that God trusts me, and I actually believe that I can choose well. And I want to explore just really practically, without adding the spiritual aspect to it, I want to explore what does it look like to figure out what's in my heart and to see if we'd be a good connect, see if we'd be a good match. And it ended up in us being married 8 months later.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Don't over-spiritualize it. If a word does come and it happens to enter into your life in this area, be thankful for it. It's like, but don't expect it, honestly.
Also, just pointer, don't share it.
Yeah, and don't share it.
Don't do that.
But Psalm 37:4 says, delight in the Lord, and he'll give you your heart's desires. Okay, so I believe it's a way better guidance system. The word actually never talks about how a spouse was selected specifically, except for in Hosea, which we saw how that worked out for him, right? But it became a representation of Jesus constantly choosing, and the church not choosing him over and over and over again, but his undying, unaffected love for the church. And so it could result in something like that if you want to choose into an experience like that with the Lord. But here's the thing. Delight in the Lord. Delight in the Lord. Delight in him. Find where you can get your needs and your fulfillment inside of him. And then you might just find your spouse running alongside you. And it's better when your spouse is a gift added to your life and not something that you desperately require to be okay.
And I'll close by just saying this has been 23 minutes long.
Nice.
I'll close just by saying, if you are someone who has heard God say to you that this is your person and that that's the man or the woman you're supposed to marry, I hope you don't hear any shame or any judgment from us. We have challenging beliefs. We disagree with each other. We're okay if you disagree with us. What we don't want you to walk away feeling is shame. Don't hear us shaming you, and please don't shame yourself. Ask the Lord, what are the tidbits you want me to pull away from everything that they share? Because this is years of process, and we might change the way that we think one day. This is just where we're at from our last decade of learning. So hear it with love, pull out the tidbits of wisdom that you want, and apply it however you wish.
But don't feel powerless to your life. Know that you made those choices.
Yeah.
That it wasn't God that forced you into that relationship. He wasn't this domineering presence that said, this is who it is, and if you don't choose them, then you're bad and you're wrong. See it as an invitation that you said yes to, and that you get to take full responsibility for that choice. So you can take ownership in your marriage.
That's how you feel powerful in anything that you do, is if you know that you're the one who chose it and you can take full ownership for it. So be empowered. Bless you. We love you.